Hello class, welcome back. I am recording a couple of lectures today on Rebecca Cron's essay on cryonics, except that I know that I have an existing video lecture that this is serving to supplement. So basically I'm reading some of the subchapters in her dissertation and taking it from there. So the first subchapter is titled Cryonics Bioethics, Justice and Accessibility in relation to cryonic suspension, and then also in terms of biomedical ethics, and also in light of how it is that we're understanding biomedical ethics developed by the authors Beauchamp and Childress. So Thomas L. Beauchamp and James F. Childress were American philosophers in the field of medical ethics. In their 1985 book, The Principles of Biomedical Ethics, which serves as a standard in medical ethics, this serves as a means of setting a moral standard of medical standard within four principles, right? Recognizable from the essay we looked at earlier, medical ethics and the trolley problem. So this is in reference to a lecture that we didn't look at this semester. So first we have number one, autonomy. So the question is, what is autonomy? That is the right for patients to make their own choices, okay? Then we have beneficence, acting in the best interest of the patients. So in other words, how is it, if you're wanting to assess how it is that I'm being ethically good as a medical practitioner, you would refer to Beauchamp and Childress's standards here, okay? So then we have non-maleficence, do not harm, which is basically the Hippocratic Oath. And then for justice, a concept that emphasizes fairness and equality among individuals. So these four principles are brought together by the cryonic enthusiast and the philosopher Charles Tandy, okay, with application to cryonic suspension for Cron, right? So first, as far as autonomy goes, we have respect for autonomy, right? So this basically entails for Tandy an obligation to keep the option of cryonic suspension open to people enough to choose it for themselves. So by providing a legal environment that protects a patient's ability to make an informed choice. Then with non-malfeasance, even though the effects of reanimation are unknown, cryonic suspension cannot be said to be worse or more harmful than simple burial or cremation of the body, okay? And then also for the principle of beneficence, Tandy basically surmises that cryonics is a beneficial alternative to burial or cremation, okay? Then in terms of justice, we should have equal and fair access to cryonic suspension for Tandy. So obviously, as you could see, Tandy is using Beauchamp and Childress's principles of biomedical ethics in order to justify cryonics ethically, okay? So essentially, and this is what Cron is citing. That's why she's citing this, is this is a way to think of how is it that we could understand cryonic suspension ethically in a medical sense, right? So essentially for Tandy, doctors have a moral obligation to ensure cryonic suspension for patients, right? So an overall position that Cron doesn't necessarily agree with, right? So with beneficence, Cron suggests that the possibility of alienation from friends and family is a very real and practical risk that does not necessarily justify full reliance on the principle of beneficence, okay? So Tandy also suggests that cryonics should be made freely available to anyone who wants it, which in terms of expense does not completely justify cryonics on the whole, right? So for everyone, the sheer expense is enough to call this into question as an ethical procedure that should be made available to everyone, right? So especially as a universally free option. In terms of justice, it stands to reason that money could be allocated for those who are living and hence need it more than by those who are resting a gamble on revival from cryonic suspension. So for a utilitarian vantage, this happens, the happiness for most is not sufficiently met for the living who likely need the resources more than those who are already dead in terms of healthcare, charity, etc. So even if on the surface it sounds nice to suggest that people should be able to freely choose to be cryonically suspended, not all can afford the procedure, right? Beyond suggesting it would be free to all, so to afford $200,000 plus per procedure could only be made available to the rich, which is exclusionary. Never mind that whatever the gamble in terms of future is only for the few, cryonicists argue that one could see cryonics as a life insurance policy, right? To be paid for over a lifetime in monthly installment payments, so on and so forth. And then also the possibility of alienation of friends and family is still an issue R.Cron elaborates on later. Never mind the fact of its expense that can't be afforded by the poor and those who can't afford it, obviously. Hence, the egoistic, exclusionistic tendencies are vividly and ethically questionable in terms of cryonics as an ethical procedure that should be made free to all for us and R.Cron, right? So another ethically problematic question rests in a case, for example, of the theoretical physicists like Stephen Hawking, who has ALS, motor neuron disease, and so could he be an agent or a candidate for cryonics? Yet what about convicted criminals and the mentally unwell, right? R.Cron proposes a committees of people and medical experts and philosophers who could be responsible for such decisions, right? Yet one can't ever escape the very real the debatable task to decide on who gets it and who doesn't, right? So that's just a quick look at the subchapter of Cryonics, Bioethics, and Justice. Cryonics and Bioethics, Justice, and Accessibility for R.Cron. And then next we'll continue the next video on is cryonics an ethical means of life extension continued. Okay, so talk to you on the other side.